Yo, what is happening, guys? How are you doing? This is Rob of Rule of Two Review. Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to part 2 of my Q&A. Of course, earlier this week I did post part 1 of my Q&A where I answered a bunch of questions from you guys that you responded to on Twitter. Today we're going to do part 2, the first time I've ever had to split this thing up into 2 parts, where I'm going to respond to your questions from the YouTube community post that I made also that same day. So we had a ton of questions last time. I've got a ton of questions today. I'm going to try to find a way to condense this and make my answers just a little bit shorter than they were last time. And with that, we're not going to burn any more time, and we're just going to hop in. So the first 2 questions today also come from 2 good friends of mine and fellow YouTube creators that I've gotten to know over the years, who have great channels and make really great content. First one comes from my buddy Clocked It. What is up, man? Thank you so much for asking a question on my community post. And he asks me, out of the 3 below, if Metroid was going to tackle a different genre, not pinball, which would you prefer? 1, Metroid Effect, a Metroid RPG like Mass Effect. 2, Metroid Squadron, a Metroid space shooter like Star Wars Rogue Squadron. Or 3, Metroid Low, a Metroid game like Diablo. This is a really, actually pretty fun and interesting question, dude. I like where you're going here. I will say, at the end of the day, I'm okay with Metroid spin-offs. I've said this before. I'm okay with a spin-off like a Pinball or even a Federation Force when it comes at a time that Metroid is getting regular games and updates, okay? So as we know, Federation Force was announced in 2015 when we were waiting for a new real Metroid game for like 5 years at the time. For all we knew, the franchise was dead, and the first time we see it came back is this weird 3DS multiplayer thing that no one wanted and didn't even have Samus. So in that environment, a spin-off isn't really something that we're looking for. It's a bit of a problem. But when we're getting a Metroid game like Metroid Prime 4, for example, I'm cool with a spin-off. And looking at the 3 that you list here, I mean, I like all 3 of these. I don't think I would say no to either of them. I will say that the Diablo-like one would probably be the one that I want the least. The Metroid Squadron or Metroid Effect, you know, oh my god. I mean, I think I might have to say the Metroid Effect, the one that's like an RPG like Mass Effect. I would love the idea of a space shooter like the Rogue Squadron series, the Star Wars games. I think that would be an awesome, cool spin-off for Metroid. Obviously, it's a sci-fi space combat kind of, you know, story and atmosphere and environment that the Metroid games are happening within. But, you know, I think that it would be really neat to get another take on a really story-heavy Metroid game like what they tried with Other M. I would like to see them find a different and hopefully better way to execute the story, get to know Samus a little bit more, maybe have some other characters, but, you know, still have it feel like a Metroid game. And, I mean, I don't know how you would do that in an RPG like a Mass Effect with a bunch of, like, branching dialogue paths within a Metroid game. It would be tricky and probably impossible to pull off, but I would love to see them try, so I think that would be my answer. The next question comes from Nintentalk, who is my very, very good buddy Pat. Makes great content, great channel for those of you who are huge Animal Crossing fans. So Pat's channel, Nintentalk, and of course Clocked It. You guys should check out their stuff if you like Nintendo content. And Pat asks me, I'm not surprised at your question here, man. He says, could Star Fox be successful and still keep the, quote, on-rails arcade gameplay, or will the franchise have to shift to more of an open world format? Yeah, thanks too, Pat. I really appreciate it. And I know you're a huge Star Fox fan. I am as well. It's not like my favorite, but I know that you definitely love your Star Fox, as you should. Star Fox is a great franchise. And in order to be successful in the future, could they stay on rails the way they've been, or would they need to shift to something more open? I would say, here's the thing when it comes to Star Fox in the future. I think that if the next Star Fox game is just great, no matter which direction they go, on rails, open world, or even back to something that uses on-foot gameplay, I think if it just kicks ass, it's going to be successful. People are going to like it. People are going to buy it. Nintendo is going to be proud of it, and they're going to promote it and pump it in that way that they can. That way where they make any game and any franchise a huge hit no matter what. Like, look at the first Splatoon on the Wii U for an example of what Nintendo's marketing can do when they want a game to be a huge hit. And so I think that if they just knew that they made a great game, they would find a way to make it sell well. You know, and I liked Star Fox Zero, but I liked it despite its problems, you know, despite the many flaws that that game has. If they made one that just rocked, it would do well. If I had to answer your question here, which one has the best chance of success? It hurts me a little bit to say this, but I think appealing to a wider market, not somebody who's attached to my nostalgia, the open world kind of thing is what they would need to do. Now, you might be asking that question because of Starlink, which was an open world space combat game that also happened to have a Star Fox connection on the Switch. And it was cool. I didn't love the game, but it was certainly cool. They did some things very right in that game. I don't necessarily want Nintendo to make a game like Starlink, though. I think that you could, if you envision in the Star Fox games where you're in your Arwing, which is not every game, or every section of every game, there are the on-rails sections, and then there are also the boss fights that are more open world. I think you could do something where maybe you could just go to different planets and be in an open world Star Fox environment. And I know that that probably even sounds like Starlink. I guess when I say I don't want it to be like Starlink, I want it to be... I don't really like the mission structure of Starlink. And I don't like the fact that there was zero linearity to it. I think that that's a game where it actually hurt the game. And also, Starlink did this thing where they tried to make it feel like being in your ship was also like playing a platformer. It's like, oh, you have like a jump and a run button while you're on the ground, or you can just fly. And it's like, I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to make it feel like I'm a little character that can jump and hop and platform and discover secrets while I'm on the surface of the planet. Or I can just be in my ship when I'm flying. And it's like, it just didn't work for me. I didn't hate it. It didn't work for me. So I want Nintendo to execute it better than Starlink. But I do have to say, nostalgically, if I could pick the direction for me, I would like it to stay on rails. Moving on to our next question. This comes from Kieran Buckley. And Kieran asks me, do you think it's possible Nintendo just doesn't have a big holiday game this year? And yes, actually... that is my answer. I do think it's possible that there is no big Nintendo game for this year, right? We've been waiting to see what Nintendo is going to unveil for the back half of 2020. It's been really a huge... It's been a slow drip, and it's been a weird year. So as I said throughout the first half of the year, constantly, I was like, I understand why Nintendo's quiet. I understand why things are moving around and Nintendo Directs are going away and they're not doing E3. It's a weird world. There's a crazy health situation going on. Many companies and many industries are affected. Nintendo is allowed. That being said, we're pretty far into the year. We're at the beginning of summer here. This is the week E3 should have been happening. And while they did eventually reveal Paper Mario, which is cool, like I'm excited for a Paper Mario game next month, I think that if there's anything else that they're going to be doing significant for the rest of the year, I think that within the next, I would say 2 months over the summer, they really need to let us know. And while I still want to believe that they might have some big holiday surprise game ready to go, for a long time I wanted to believe that that could be Pikmin 4. Bayonetta 3 might end up still being that game. Third party, but still a big game. There's also a chance that none of that happens. I mean, I've said this. I even made a video on this topic. What if Nintendo has decided to, step away from the year? They're calling 2020 off. They're calling it a wash, and they're waiting till next year. Maybe in some ways they're even doing it just to make room for Sony and Microsoft to launch their next-gen consoles. Maybe they're like, there's too much working against us. The health situation, the work-from-home order, slowing down development, can't make Nintendo Directs, PS5 and Xbox Series X coming. Why throw so many of our few products out to die? Why try to hold on to 2020 when we can instead let 2020 go as just a wash? We'll write it off and come back next year twice as strong with some of the stuff 2020 was supposed to have. I mean, it could just go 50-50. So, I'm not going to put money on this answer. I'm just going to say that there is a good chance that they don't have a game for this year. And next up, we are hearing from your boy Zach, and your boy Zach asks me, when Metroid Prime 4 does come out, do you think they will also release another Metroid game along with it, like they did with Metroid Prime 1 and Metroid Fusion? Good question, and he's right. When I think some people forget this, but in 2002, when Metroid Prime released on the GameCube, it was also the same day that Fusion came out on the Game Boy Advance. And that was really exciting. I was definitely a fan of Metroid at the time, but I wasn't the super fan that I am now, because really Prime 1 is what kind of changed that for me. I mean, I'm old enough, you guys know, I played Metroid on the NES, okay? So I am old enough to have experienced every Metroid game as it released. I liked Metroid, Metroid 2, and Super Metroid, although I got to Super Metroid a little bit late. I liked those games. I mean, in fact, I basically loved those games, but Prime 1 came out in 2002. I was 22 years old, changed my life, and so now here I am today as a huge Metroid fan. So when that happened, I was pretty new working at a GameStop at the time, and I was like, this is crazy, there's 2 Metroid games at one time. That's neat. I can't wait to play Metroid Prime. And that was the extent of it. It wasn't like this huge industry-shaking thing. If they did that nowadays, it probably would be an industry-shaking thing. It would make a lot of news and a lot of headlines, and I think it would be very good for the Metroid franchise. Do I think they will do it? No, I don't. But is there a chance that they decide to do that and kind of line things up in such a way? Yeah, there's a tiny chance. I mean, we're all waiting to see if the Metroid Prime trilogy releases. If so, maybe they're just going to double dose us and give us Prime 4 and the trilogy on the same day. A lot of folks, myself included, have been theorizing another 2D Metroid game for the Switch is in the work in some way, shape, or form. If so, maybe they decide, hey, let's double dose this, and this great 2D game we have, let's make sure this comes out the same day as Prime 4. We will replicate what happened in 2002 with this new release of Metroid Prime 4. I wouldn't put money on it, okay, so I wouldn't get any of your hopes up about it, but there's a tiny sliver of a chance that I could see him do it. I just don't really expect it. And next question comes from iWanDJ. And iWan asks me, what genre of game would you like to see Nintendo explore or have another go at with a new IP? Really, really good question. And I've actually had the same answer to this question for many years now. And that would be something that's a scary game. I would love to see Nintendo tackle horror in some way. And I mean, I don't mean Luigi's Mansion. I had to say that on a live stream recently. Like, you know, people could be like, oh, Luigi's Mansion is a Nintendo horror game. And it's like, yeah, no, it's not. Okay, I love Luigi's Mansion. That's not what that game is. Yeah, it's like a scary thing, but it's a Mario universe, Mushroom Kingdom version of scary. It's not scary. I think it would be really neat to see Nintendo do something that would kind of veer towards like a horror element. Obviously, they would have to do it in a Nintendo way, which means it's not going to probably be very gory. It's not going to be about blood and ripping people apart or monsters eating people and stuff like that, you know. It's not going to have swearing and nudity. It's going to be something where Nintendo just really goes out of their way to make something very atmospherically scary and tense. You know, scary can also just mean tension, you know. It could mean like the effect you get from watching a thriller movie. You know, a thriller isn't so much horror where they're throwing blood and monsters at you, but it could still be very thrilling. And I think that, I don't know, I mean, Nintendo, I love the fact that their franchises are very, you know, family friendly. They're appealing to adults just like they are kids and vice versa. I think that that's great. That's why we love them. But I also think it would be cool to see them finally mature just a little bit and make like a T-rated game, a new IP that is a Nintendo property with Nintendo characters that is a little bit more scary. I mean, you look at like the Metroid franchise and Fire Emblem franchise that very much veer towards the more, they skew slightly older into the teen kind of age range. And why can't they do something that would be a little bit scary? I mean, it's hard to picture, but I don't know. That's my answer. I would like to see them try. Next up, we have Backstreet Gem, who asks me, I just recently found your channel. Really enjoying it so far. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. How would you sum up your channel's content in one sentence? I would say, really nerdy, passionate dude blabs about Metroid and Star Wars for a long time. Next up, we have Green Man, who says, do you think A, Ridley will be in either Metroid Prime 4 or the next 2D Metroid game? Maybe. B, we may not see him for the next few entries in the series. I doubt it. C, he will never appear in any future Metroid games. Definitely not. Ridley will never go away forever. He's got to be there. He's Samus's main foe. Ridley for life. Next question comes from Mr. Jono Daz, who is one of my oldest and kindest and longest running supporters and followers and commenters on the channel. So what is up, Jono? Thanks so much for asking a question, buddy. Good to hear from you. And he says, yo, Rob, my questions are, should Zelda have a collection like the rumored Mario collection coming, containing Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, and Skyward Sword? Plus, should Metroid Other M get a remastered, remake, or a reboot version on the Switch at some point? Thanks, man. Yeah, so thanks again, Jono. Good questions. I actually touched a little bit on the Mario thing. I think in the last Q&A was when I answered that question. Was that right? Was that just in the last Q&A a week ago? I think so. And so, you know, would we see... I'll riff on it a little bit longer here to answer your question. We have these rumors about the collection of Mario remasters coming to the Switch. Still not confirmed, but that's the talk of the town. And so should we also see something for Zelda? I mean, I would, of course, like... I think we all want that to happen. You know, if you're a Nintendo fan, it's hard to be a Nintendo fan and not also a Zelda fan. And I think the idea of a Zelda collection on the Switch has been something that Zelda fans have asked for a long time. We've already seen Wind Waker and Twilight Princess get an HD remaster on the Wii U. Two fantastic releases, and Wind Waker being my favorite Zelda game of all time. I thought that was amazing. Skyward Sword is the X factor, and I've discussed it numerous times. I mean... I love Skyward Sword, you guys. I don't care what the haters say. Skyward Sword is a great game. You're hearing me say it. It's a great game. Stop hating. But it's a tricky game to port, right? Because the motion controls make it kind of really difficult to move that thing to different platforms. But I would certainly like to see it. I think we all want an HD remaster and port of Skyward Sword. So... if there was a way to make Skyward Sword work, then great. That game does not deserve to be stuck on the Wii forever. It should be able to come to another console. If they wanted to give us all three, that would be fantastic too. Will Nintendo do it? Ooh, I don't know. That one almost feels like a too good to be true to me. It's possible, but I just don't know if I would put any faith into that yet. I mean, here's the thing. We haven't seen the Mario stuff confirmed yet, so... if the Mario stuff gets confirmed, and depending on how they're releasing it, if it's true, I may change my tune. But right now, before we've seen the Mario stuff, I'm not yet ready to commit to the Zelda compilation Switch release because, like I said, too good to be true. As far as Metroid Other M, man, you know that I want it. I discussed that. I did for sure discuss that on my last Q&A. I think that it makes sense. I've even made a video about this topic. The game is not perfect. I know people dislike it. It's got flaws. However, I still think it's a really, really good game. Way better than people say. And I think it deserves a second chance. And beyond that, I think if they made a remastered version on Switch, updated the visuals, gave us analog stick support for the controls, and just tweaked a couple things here and there, I guarantee you, I give you the Rob Rule of Two review 100% guarantee. Many people will come around on that game. I think time heals all wounds, and people come around to very controversial releases over time. It's happened in movies and video games several times over the decades. There's plenty of examples. And I think Metroid Other M would be one of those. Would there still be people who just hate it forever? Yes. And that's fine. No one has to like a game that you don't like. That's fine. But I do think that the consensus will probably... turn, and I think the narrative will shift a little bit with the re-release of Other M, and I think we'd see a lot of people talk about it like it's a good game. Next up, we have a question from Casual Tie 5, who asks me, do you think we will get a Splatoon spin-off in the next years? If so, what kind of game might it be? Imagine a Splatoon Metroidvania based on weapon interactions, for example. Really cool question, and you know what? Yeah, I actually do think there's something to this. Splatoon has proven to be a huge hit for Nintendo, a very lucrative franchise. Both versions of this game have sold insanely well, and the sole fact that the first one sold so well on the Wii U, again, is a gargantuan achievement that cannot be undersold. Because it was the Wii U and a new IP, how did they manage to sell so many copies? It's crazy. And on the Switch, I mean, we just had the sales numbers. It was like between like 12 and 15 million, I think, copies of Splatoon 2. And it's a damn good game. Like, yeah, Nintendo ain't done with Splatoon. And I think that they probably know that there's something to be said for making like a single player adventure, you know? And a lot of us have said what they've done with the campaign in those two games kind of reminds us of like Mario Galaxy, but with Splatoon paint weapons. Why can't they take that concept and expand it to a full-fledged open-world $60 single-player experience? I think it would be amazing. In fact, I would probably prefer that to a multiplayer Splatoon 3. And you talk about a Splatoon Metroidvania game, I mean, I don't know if you mean like Metroidvania, like a 2D game that uses the backtracking and weapon upgrades, that doesn't sound too appealing to me. I'd be curious. It doesn't really light my nerd tingles on fire or anything. But in terms of being like maybe like an open world game where you would have to do some backtracking and visit locations and come back to old locations and stuff and upgrade your weapons. I mean, maybe. I think that would work a little bit more than 2D. But more than anything, I would like to see something that's just an expanded, fleshed out version of the campaigns from the first 2 games. Echo the Gecko asks me, show your moves. Who do you main in Smash Brothers? Well, in Smash for Wii U, I mained Zero Suit Samus. And in Smash for Switch, I main Dark Samus. So no surprise. Both characters are Metroid characters. And keep in mind, when I use the term main, I'm not like a Smash pro. I'm only average at the game. I don't play hardcore. I love Smash Brothers to death, but I'm not one of those hardcore Smash guys. I've played and loved every single game. I never really had a main in the first 3 games. I didn't pick a character to be my main person until we went online more successfully. Like, Brawls Online was so bad. Wii U's was still flawed but better, and that's when I picked Zero Suit Samus because I was really good with her. And Switch's is pretty darned good, and I've become really good with Dark Samus. I was asking for Dark Samus for like 10 years in Smash Brothers, so the fact that we got her in the game means I had to dedicate. It was between her and Ridley is fine, but not great, so for me, it's Dark Samus. All right, I think we're moving through these much, much faster than last time, so that's definitely good. I mean, I like making longer videos, and I think you guys like watching them, but sometimes, man, you know, when I make like a 45-minute Q&A, I'm sitting here for over an hour probably doing the recording and the cutting and the breaks and sitting in front of these lights and stuff. So I try to make them shorter. Like, if this turns out to be less than 30 minutes, I probably will still have been sitting here for 45. So anyway, you don't care about that stuff. Let's get to the next question. That comes from 6ebas, 6EBAS. Not sure how to pronounce that. They ask me, despite the amount of fans asking for a new F-Zero game, do you still see it as a profitable franchise for Nintendo to produce? That's a very, very good question. And I would say that, in general, I think we know all the previous F-Zero releases, which were like on the Super Nintendo, the 64, the Game Boy Advance, the GameCube. All great games. I mean, I don't know if they've made a bad F-Zero game of the 4 or 5 that they've made ever. They're all really good. GX was absolutely spectacular. That game was transcendently good. But I think we also know that it's not the hugest franchise, right? It's not a big moneymaker. It's not a big seller. But to counter that point, I would say it's probably not a very expensive series to produce. I would imagine if they were going to make a new F-Zero, let's say a new F-Zero on the Switch, and it sold less than 1 million copies. Let's say a new F-Zero comes out and sells 700,000 copies. I'm willing to bet that it would cost so little, you know, little by comparison, to produce an F-Zero game, that it would probably be extremely profitable even at 700,000 units. You know, and I am literally pulling numbers out of my butt, so don't take this as quotes, but I'm just kind of guessing based on my own interpretations of gaming over the decades. Maybe a new F-Zero game could come out and only cost like a couple of million to make. 700,000 $60 game sales is going to be a lot more than a couple $1,000,000. They're going to be making a ton of money on that. And then I'll even throw this on top of that. I am lowballing the hell out of F-Zero, saying a brand new Switch F-Zero only selling 700,000 copies. Trust me, that's a lowball. I think it would be guaranteed 1.5 million, if not maybe even a couple of million, because again, Nintendo's marketing, when they want one of their games to sell, they make it sell. All they have to do is make a good F-Zero game and really push it with their marketing. And every single game on the Switch, especially from Nintendo, sells like crazy. The Switch moves software, it's magical. So you have such a built-in like template for success that if Nintendo was going to go out of their way and say, hey, after all these years, we're finally giving you the new F-Zero game you've been asking, it's going to be great. They're going to market the hell out of it, and it's going to sell like crazy because it's on the Switch. Next up, we have Shadow's Edge, who asks me, what was the driving force that got you to start the channel? Really good question. I appreciate that it's not really focused on a game or anything. I've talked about this on the channel, but it was probably years ago the last time it came up. I started Rule of Two Review in 2010 as a WordPress blog site where I was going to review video games and movies. And I had gotten so into what IGN was as a website and the fact that they were doing podcasts, which were very new to me at the time, that I was like, I want to create my own version of something like that because I just love talking about video games and movies. So I started this site with the help of some of my friends who are better at that stuff than me. And I also then was like, I want to do a podcast. Like, IGN's podcasts are so cool. I want to do a movie and gaming podcast. So also with the help of friends, I started 2 podcasts, One Games, One Movies, that was up on iTunes, featuring a bunch of my buddies. This was when I lived in Denver. So I had a group of my friends would get together once a week for the Movies Cast, and another group of friends getting together every week for the Games Cast. And we were all together sitting in a room doing this stuff with one crappy mic in the center of the room. It was really low quality. But it was a lot of fun. It was so exciting. Time went on after a couple of years, and it was just hard to keep up on it every day. It was just a side thing for fun. And then I was starting to get into all the gaming content on YouTube in the early 2010s. And so in 2013, I was like, you know what? I'm going to bring Rule of Two Review back, and I'm just going to make a YouTube channel. I think I can just talk into a microphone. Let me buy some cheap gear. I'll get a capture card. I'll get a microphone and an editing program, and I'm just gonna make videos kind of like Review Tech USA. That was a huge inspiration for me, what the early 2010s version of that channel was. I still like Review Tech USA, but especially back then. So I was like, I just have stuff to say about gaming news and movie news. So long story short, that's what I did. I got some gear, I started doing it, I figured out how to do it on my own, and I went from there. And here we are 6.5 years later, and Rule of Two Review is what it is. All right, 2 more questions to go. And the next one comes from Christian Deisner, who says, would you like to see Nintendo ramp up their online support to something akin to the PS4? Example would be supporting Bluetooth headsets, creating party chats for easy communication with friends, and even sending messages. Also, what UI changes would you like to see for the Switch menu? Putting games in folders or sorting them by genre and whatnot. Looking forward to the video, Rob. Big old long time fan. Oh, thanks, Christian. I appreciate it, man. It's good to hear from you. You know, I have a weird opinion when it comes to the online stuff for Nintendo. Excuse me. And also for the Switch's UI. And that is that I really don't care much about either. The online stuff, it's important. And I use the online features on all 3 of my consoles and on my PC. And so the only reason I want Nintendo to improve their online support is mostly for the sake of other people who find issues with it. Like, it would just be nice PR for them to finally have improved it. For me, I don't really need much out of any of the online services I pay for. I just need to be able to get online and do things with games that play online. As long as I can do that whenever I want, no hassle, I don't really care. Everything else is fine to me. So should they do things like party chat and Bluetooth and all that? Yes, they should. Do I need it? No. Same for the Switch's UI. People want all these things, themes and folders and menu music and all this stuff. And of course that stuff would be nice. I'm not going to say no to it, but I personally just don't really need any of those things. In fact, when it comes to the Switch, I'm somebody who kind of likes the fact that it's really simple and bare bones. Again, I liked the Wii and the Wii U having some of these other things. And at the end of the day, if there's anything I probably would like, it would be themes. But in general, I kind of like the fact that the Switch is simple. I turn it on, it boots fast, it does everything fast, it switches apps quickly, it's touchscreen, I can swipe through, I'm just, just big, huge squares. This is your game, this is your YouTube, here's your shopping, here's your profile in the corner. Like, the settings is right here, here's your pictures. I don't know, I don't need a lot of these bells and whistles, you guys. I know a lot of people like that stuff nowadays, and I think it comes from a lot of gamers, not everybody, but a lot of gamers who might be younger, and so they're used to devices doing everything. And I'm sorry, I'm from a generation where most of us, we didn't even have devices in our pockets. Our computers weren't attached to the internet, and our video game consoles didn't do anything fancy. There were no home screens, there were no home buttons on our controllers, and there were no, YouTube apps and Netflix apps and playing DVDs and Blu-rays. They just played the video games that you physically put into your console. And if games continue to be that, if game consoles continue to be that simple, I'm actually not going to cry about it. I like the conveniences, yes, and I use them, but do I need them? Do I complain when a console doesn't have them? No, for the most part, not really. And so for our last question of the day, this comes from Fitz the Fast. And Fitz asks me, as far as Metroid's story and lore goes, what do you think is next for the franchise? Or what would you personally like to see? So this is something that I've talked about several times. Recently, actually, I've talked about this for probably a while. When I think about where I want specifically the story to go, you've heard me say this, I would like for them to continue to explore the Chozo. I think the Chozo are a fascinating aspect to the lore and the history of Metroid, also to the lore and the history of Samus, because that's a huge part to her past. And I think that a lot of it is left unexplored. Really, Metroid Prime, the first one, and Metroid Zero Mission's additional content are really the only things as far as the video games that have explored it. There is like a manga comic series out there that explores it quite a bit and is about a lot of Samus as a little girl, and it's really cool, but it's not the same as putting that in the games. So I've said with Metroid Prime 4, I'd like to see them explore the Chozo, Samus's connection to the Chozo, and even explore the origin of the Chozo. I think that's the most important thing. But whether or not they do that in Prime 4 or not, whatever happens after Metroid Prime 4, I still would like to see them go more into that, you know? Like, what's the deal with Samus, the Chozo, them raising her, what happened to her parents, you know, when she was a little girl, all of the history on Tallon 4, like what's going on with that stuff? Where did the Chozo come from? What's their history even before that stuff? I think that there's a really cool story to tell. And when it comes to just the franchise as a whole, when I think of the kind of games that they make, I think after Prime 4, there's a good chance that we move far away from the first-person stuff, and we might get something wildly different than we've ever seen before. Maybe some of like the game structure of Metroid Prime continues, but maybe in other ways they also pick up where a game like Metroid Other M left off. And I know we've already talked about the Other M thing, and we've acknowledged several times that it's controversial and people don't like it, but I think that there is a way to pick up from the third-person action gameplay element of that game and do something more with it. So, whereas the story element, I hope to see them kind of go towards the Chozo situation, when it comes to gameplay, I would almost like to see them move away from the first-person thing for a while, even though I know Metroid Prime's like my favorite game ever. I would like to see them venture into something different. Obviously, going back to 2D would be great. I already kind of expect them to do that. I think that Other M was a great step in the right direction for a 3D third-person game, but I want to see them do it even more, and I want to see them do it better and more commit to the idea and just do something totally amazing and groundbreaking for Metroid in terms of just a huge, vast world and universe to explore in a third-person perspective. And I think that there's a way they can do it and still make it feel like a Metroid game. People doubted the ability to make Metroid work in first-person, and they did it better than anyone could have expected. And although Other M fell flat for a lot of people, I still think there's a way to do the same thing for third-person action. And so, I don't know, I guess that's where I'd like to see Metroid go in the future. And so, my friends, that is that for this epic two-part Q&A. This was a ton of fun. Thank you again to everyone who asked questions. If I did not get to your question, I am sorry. I just had too many to answer everything in the world. But of course, if you want to be a part of these in the future, make sure that you are subscribed to the channel here. And of course, be following me on Twitter, where I am very, very active. And with that, this was a ton of fun. Thanks again to you guys, and this video is a wrap. Thanks, of course, as always, for tuning in. This is Rob of Rule of 2 Review, and I will catch you next time on another video.